What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the altar again, and this time we are here with Jonathan of Come to Grief. Thanks for being here, man. It's great to have you here.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, anytime, man, anytime. It's so awesome to have you here. So, the full length album, When the World Dies, absolutely incredible. I call it doom and gloom to make you do all the violence on the drywall in your living room. What was the sort of thought process behind the making of this album? Was there sort of like a preconceived vision, or was this a very like experimental sort of improvisational songwriting process?
Everything really came together kind of organically. Like there was no real thought in terms of what we were trying to make it sound like or anything like that. All the material just kind of came together. Of course, as far as the concept goes, a lot of what we talk about generally is pretty doom and gloom anyways, and abysmal kind of worldview. So, there was no real conscious thought about what to do, but in the end, we're all pretty happy about the way it came out. We feel like it kind of represents what we were trying to get across.
Mm-hmm. Would you say, like, when you have this sort of like deteriorating and having despair as the main subject matter of Come to Grief in a way, would you say that the lyrics also determine the music in a way? Like, could a lyrical idea determine the direction of the song structure, or does there need to be music before a lyrical idea comes into play?
Yeah, generally the music comes first. A lot of times, Terry, especially when he writes, a lot of times he'll definitely come up with the music first, and then a title, and then gradually a couple little like bits of lyrics come together, and then he and I kind of throw around some ideas together with the lyrics. And a lot of times it's really just inspired by the sound and the mood and the feel of the song. And then I think that just kind of brings out different concepts and ideas, and then the lyrics kind of follow after that.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to the darkness that you portray in your music, is this coming from a very personal, internal sort of aspect, or is this like a very observational method of looking at the darkness in the world?
Probably, it's definitely personal. I think for all of us, probably could be a little bit of both at times. Sometimes you have to separate yourself from a situation, or just look at something, from fly on the wall view of something in the world or something in life, and imagine what it would feel like, the perspective of that situation. But a lot of it just comes from a personal place. A lot of us have dealt with various hardships in life, or mental struggles or anything like that kind of prompt a lot of that lyrical subject matter. But also just worldview, looking around at the world and the way things have been the past few years. And that helps it just kind of flow right out, because things have been pretty fucked for a while.
I don't think there was a better time to release this album than in the days that we are living in right now. This is the soundtrack to the times, as I call it.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
Yeah. Would you say that music is a means, this might be kind of like a very vague sort of question, but like, would you look at this music as a way of sort of confronting your demons or conquering your demons, or is this a way of making peace with your demons and you use that as the means of inspiration?
Oh yeah, I'd say a little of both, from both categories there. I think being able to do this is like, sometimes it feels like you get up on stage and you play your ass off and you get off, and it's like you've been exercised, like a lot of this, you feel better afterwards, so as a result of kind of getting this out, it definitely helps. Mm-hmm. Daily life stresses, or whatever, it's definitely cathartic. You do this, you write these songs, you get to go out and play them on stage, and you just wreck yourself on stage and scream and go nuts, and then afterwards you feel great. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it definitely helps for a little while.
It is very cathartic, but in a way, is it also maybe make it deteriorating as well? Like, do you almost like need to like inflict internal pain in order to sort of get in that songwriting process?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it just, whenever it comes to me, it comes pretty organically. I don't really intentionally put myself in a position where I feel what I would normally feel when I'm writing lyrics. That kind of just comes to me. Sometimes I have to stop for a second and think about a time when I was feeling whatever reflects in the lyrics. And other times I just am there and could just write it out. But I don't necessarily have to put myself in that position or go out of my way to put myself in that.
Well, it's funny. I was interviewing Candlemass this morning, and we were having a discussion about like this sort of like aspects of doom. It's a fairly silly question, but I'm I've always wondered this because I've interviewed some of the most depressing bands out there, whether it would be Candlemass or My Dying Bride or Paradise Lost. Do you think that maybe you could write this in a bit of a happier place? Like, let's say we were living in a time where the world wasn't so shitty, which historically I can't really think of that, but like, but do you think if you were in a sort of happier place, it would make more of a challenge to write the music that you do?
Not necessarily. I think I definitely have a lot of source material to look back into for my own personal struggles. And but I mean, look at like a song like Bludgeon and Soul, for example. I had to, that was a bit of a different vibe lyrically, and I kind of had to go at a place. I mean, it basically, I'm not a real religious person, but I kind of was thinking, I wonder what it'd be like to die and go to hell and be tortured for eternity. And so I kind of started writing about that. So in a weird way, it has a bit of a religious overtone and like science fiction vibe to it, which obviously I know it's like nothing about because I haven't died and gone to hell. But yeah, so in regards to just being able to, I have plenty of source material, so I could write something based on a memory or a thought of something that happened in my life previously.
From the Worst of Times EP and the Pray for the End EP and this full-length album, because there's, when it comes to darkness, it's such a, what I find so amazing about that subject matter is that there's so many different ways to approach it. If you're looking, if the inspiration is something that you're seeing out in the world versus like a personal experience or something like that, do you have like a different attachment to that song depending on what specifically it could be about?
Yeah, definitely. I think it could definitely, certain songs could mean a lot to you just by singing the song, and it brings you back to what may have inspired it in the first place. So and some stuff you can go at more of an abstract, from an abstract place. Those songs can usually be a lot easier because you just kind of comes from imagination rather than personal experience. So but yeah, some of the ones that really bring you back to those dark times, I guess those are the hardest ones to play through again.
When you play this live, because when I saw you at St. Vitus last year, which was a fantastic show, like you really created like an alternate reality. Like you almost kind of like made us find comfort in that despair, if you will. Do you feel when you play these songs live, does it almost kind of put you back in that sort of mindset when you first wrote it in a way, or when you are presenting it in front of an audience, that kind of brings a different layer of context to it?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, I think it could be like a group therapy thing, because it's like, there's comfort in knowing that other people have been through what you've been through. And I think a lot of times people will come to us about the music and the lyrics and the subject matter and stuff, and they could relate to it. And even though it's really dark, and a lot of it could be, some people don't really understand it. Like, why the hell are they singing about that kind of stuff? People find comfort in knowing that other people have been through what they've been through. And in a weird way, we go through this kind of like group therapy session when we play. People jump around, they get nuts, they have fun. And at the end, everybody feels great, So in a lot of ways, it's really negative. The subject matter can be really negative, but it's really positive in a way too, because we all feel good afterwards. So
in terms of the sound of Come to Grief, because, there's been a lot of different styles of music that does address this internal pain. Complete apples and oranges band, but, a band like Disturbed writes a lot about, internal pain in a way. But then you have like a lot of black metal bands and a lot of death metal bands and metalcore bands and all that. Why do you feel that the style of Come to Grief is the best means of expression for the internal and external pain that you talk about?
That's a good question. I only just saying that it's real to us and what we are, and where our influences come from and everything else. So There couldn't really be anything else that would be as perfect a soundtrack to the lyrics, I guess.
Yeah.
It perfectly reflects who we are and where we come from musically.
Yeah, there's times where maybe like the emotion isn't raw, but the sound is, and vice versa. But I think Come to Grief succeeds in both regards. You're raw in its sound and raw with its emotion.
Oh, thank you.
Uh, in order to when it comes to collaborating with a band and collaborating with your with your current bandmates, is it better if everybody is really on the same page and feeling the same way, or could all of you being in your own different worlds maybe actually help enhance the songwriting process?
um, yeah, I mean, I think it's like anything else. We just have to kind of pass around ideas, and some of us, if like Terry and I, if we're working on songs like that, if we have an idea, like he comes up with something, he has an idea, and he'll bring it like halfway, and then he'll pass it over to me, and then I, put my own kind of spin on it, and then we kind of, it's like a group effort, really, to try to kind of bring about like, it's like a mosaic or a collage, I guess, if you will, of a little bit of this idea and a little bit of that idea and a little of these feelings from various people. But, a lot of it just reflects the general outlook of life that we all feel, I think. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Sometimes you're working on a song for days and weeks and months, and I've always wondered, like, I don't understand how some people find it so easy to just put something aside and come back to it later. But do you find it maybe like the longer you're working on something, the harder it is to sort of like maintain that emotional spark that initially started the idea?
No, not necessarily. A lot of When the World Dies actually were songs that we had waiting in the wings for a while, at the very least ideas, prior to us getting together and actually going to record them. We went to the studio to record. We had only been really working on them for a few months prior to that. We had all the songs that were there, all the arrangements that were kind of in place, and then we basically got together for maybe a dozen times before we went to the studio and just hammered those songs out in order before we went to the studio, and a couple of those songs were like done in one take, and because we just were playing them so much. And we actually since then have had another full album of material just sitting there waiting to go. And I know that when it's time for us to get to it, we're gonna just get right to it, and we'll fill out all of the the skeleton is there. We'll just fill it all out, add all the things that we need to it.
Would you consider the Worst of Times EP and Pray for the End EPs, would you consider these two EPs to also maybe have a relationship or be kind of like for lack of better words, the prequel to When the World Dies, if you will? Or do you consider everything that Come to Grief has made its own sort of like standout and its own secular aspect in your adventures with Come to Grief?
Yeah, kind of. It's almost like a prequel in a way, because it was just, we're all real happy with how When the World Dies came out. And I think that doing all those things that we did prior to that were really necessary for us to get to that point where we were like, okay, we're really like firing on all cylinders here. But they definitely reflect a lot of what we were doing with When the World Dies too. And, musically and lyrically and subject matter, they all share the same kind of bleak outlook, and in a way are all, it's like a prequel, but a lot of it is all like a continuous, the next one I'm sure probably will be similar in some ways, but we'll try to take it to another level. Like When the World Dies, there are certain things musically that we did that I think we were a little bit forward looking on that. And I hope that the next thing that we'll be able to do the same thing.
When it comes to getting for you in the songwriting process, do you find it better when you're in the company of your other bandmates and it all starts off in a very collaborative effort, or isolation being such a great fuel for creativity being what it is? Do you find it easier to come up with ideas when you're more or less alone and there's something in between you and your instrumentation?
A lot of times when I'm working on ideas, I like working alone generally. Terry, a lot of times he'll do the same thing when he writes stuff. He'll write uh, the song and the riffs, and he has a loose arrangement, and then he brings it to the table, and then we all kind of flesh it out together. And a couple of the ideas that I've submitted to the band, generally speaking, I'll just come up with it. I'll do it by myself, and then I'll go over it like 50 times before I finally go, okay, I feel comfortable bringing this to the table now.
Well, you led me perfectly into the next question, which is also the hardest one, because with a track like Our End Begins being just a little bit over 2 minutes, but a track like Death Can't Come Soon Enough being 8.5 minutes, how do you know when a song is finished?
Wow, that's a good question. It's weird. We surprisingly get through these songs a lot quicker than we expect. I think at first we're thinking it's going to take us a really long time to get through it, and we managed to work together pretty well and efficiently. That I think that we end up going through it. Sometimes I think we feel like we go through them too quick almost, and we wish that we had a year or two before we went to the studio to just kind of keep playing them. And they go together pretty quick usually. I think we have the idea and the riffs are there and everything else, and then we have a general arrangement down, and then all that's left is just to put the lyrics down. So once I learned how to play the song on the guitar and I could sing at the same time, then after a few practices, everything's pretty much good to go. But when the worst of times, for example, we had that song or that album, that EP. A few of those songs were really not totally put together by the time we went to the studio. And by the time we got to the studio, we're like, okay, we're just wrapping some of these up. So so we had a couple of those songs pretty concrete, and the other couple of them we had to kind of finish right when we were the week before we were going to the studio. So, but yeah, we've really come to be able to figure out how to work pretty well together and do it pretty quickly. So I think we could come up with this, get this next album together pretty quick.
So
hopefully.
Well, you kind of, in a way, just answered my next question, because you mentioned that a lot of the songs off of this new album you that were being sat on for a little bit. So, is what we're hearing on When the World Dies how these songs were originally arranged and how they were originally conceived in a way, or did these maybe change a lot over the span of time between when you finished it and when we're finally hearing it?
No, they're pretty much how we came up with them in the first place, I guess. They just playing them a lot, you kind of start to feel things out a little bit. You tweak little things here and there, and but for the most part, in general, I think I think it helps that we're all pretty like-minded, with what we want and our vision that we're trying to put forth into the world. So it helps when we work together that we all kind of know what we're trying to do with it. After a while, we've been doing this for 7 years now, so we all kind of know what the other one's thinking. So when we're working on something together, we kind of go, oh, okay, I know what you're trying to do there. And, all work together to make that happen. So a lot of the ideas come forth 80%, and then the rest of us kind of help to bring it the rest of the way.
Mm-hmm. And you being both the vocalist and the guitarist, do you almost find the two forms of instrumentation, does your vocals have to reflect in what you play on the guitar and vice versa in a way, or do you are they connected, or are they two separate forms of instrumentation and two forms of self-expression?
Sometimes, but I actually a few times on the new album tried to kind of separate the two, and I rather than just playing along with the guitar and the notes, I was like, okay, I'm gonna just try to go for this song. Like Devastation of Souls, for example, that's a song that I put vocals down on without considering the guitar parts at all. I just said, I'm just going to do the vocals how I think they should go. And then I kind of threw myself afterwards, because then I had to play the song and sing it together while kind of having contradicting vocal and guitar parts. So that took me a few practices to kind of link the two up. But yeah, sometimes it will go right along with the guitar parts, and sometimes I'll try to do something a little bit different.
I don't care what style of music it is, whether it's Come to Grief or Metallica. To this day, I don't understand how somebody could sing and play guitar at the same time. It's like a muscle memory thing, remembering the notes, remembering the lyrics at the same time. It's like splitting your body into alternate realities, I feel.
It can be challenging at times, for sure. Like I said, Devastation of Souls, I was like, I think I might have to put the guitar down on this one. It took me a few times of playing it through. I'm like, okay, I got it finally. But yeah, at first I was like, wow, I really screwed myself here without the way I did the vocals. And then I was like, but I'm happy with how it came out because I'm glad I did it a little bit different from the way I normally do it. So
Definitely. And the final question I wanted to ask you is circling back to the live Come to Grief show. Again, to anybody watching this, go see Come to Grief live. You will not regret it. It's an amazing experience. Is there at all a similar energy that you channel into your live presence as you do when you're songwriting, or do you consider them two completely separate arts altogether?
I think it's definitely, for me at least, it's separate. I think I'm a, you know, I try to be a little more focused when I'm working on stuff, and then when we play live, it's a little bit more of like a frenzied melee. You know, like we just really put our all into it. You know, it's like the grand finale of all the work that we put into, at the very end. We're like, okay, and we get to do that. If we go on tour, we get to do that every night, which is great. But yeah, it's a little bit different. So we go out there and a little bit, like you said, it's muscle memory. We've all been playing these songs. We need to go out there and just like play our asses off and actually enjoy the hard work that we put into it.
Yeah, and I'd imagine too, because the studio is such, when you're in the studio, it is such a controlled environment and a fairly static environment. I'd imagine it's kind of difficult to replicate the live energy in the studio versus the stage.
Oh yeah, I was pretty. When we went to God City with Kurt Ballou from Converge. He produced the album, and I was pretty rigid. I was standing there like stiff as a board. I was like a mannequin, like doing all my parts because I was like, I don't want to be the guy that messes everything up, and then we had to restart the take. So, yeah, I'm definitely a lot more loose on stage than I am in the studio.
Yeah. Do you almost have to like practice crowd interaction and stage presence as much as the song itself in a way?
Not really, no. Luckily, Terry likes to take the mic and handle a lot of that, so I don't need to think about all that often.
It's always great to have that one bandmate that does that, right?
Yeah.
So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today and for such a great conversation. And thank you for giving us When the World Dies. It's an amazing album for the times, as I said. Is there just anything else with Come to Grief that you would like to promote in terms of tours or new music that we could be seeing in the future?
Yeah, we've got a tour. We're going out. We got 5 dates around New England with Barishi from Vermont, and they're on Season of Mist, and a band called False Gods, who's from Long Island. They're on Seeing Red Records. We're playing Providence. Let's see, what are the dates? The 16th through the 20th. So Providence, Concord, Connecticut, Wallingford, Connecticut, Brattleboro, and Portland. So yeah, we're all on all social media stuff. You can find all of our tour dates and everything there, and come on out.
Hell yeah. Well, thank you so much. Everybody, we are here with Come to Grief, When the World Dies. It is out now. We will see you next time on Heavy New York.